Behold the venom produced by the head of the snake. Beware the head of the snake. Stay vigilant, my friend. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for spending your time in the Tiger's Den. We will try not to waste it. It is Wednesday, January 10th, 2024 AD. So put some plastic on the floor and on the walls because you have the tiger by the tail. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. We might disagree on a couple things, but you will learn a lot. You will learn a lot if you listen to the interview. So I think we're going to jump right into this. And what I usually do with my guests is I like to ask them, number one, give us a little background on yourself, and then kind of, tell us how you got involved in this world of looking into things that of alternative history and things of that matter.
Well, I have always been an outstanding student. I had, straight A's in high school. I mentioned to you earlier, I went to a Jesuit high school, very, very competitive. And I had a 4.0 in college, but I could recognize that if I had an important thought, it would be suppressed. And I won't go into all the details, but it's just a very unfortunate experience in college trying to talk to the professors who wanted to tell me how everything is, and it's just the way we say it is, and don't you dare have an independent thought. And this is in the middle of the Vietnam War, right? So that there was stuff to talk about. And then when I was 20, a friend of mine had a bootleg copy of the Zapruder film. The Zapruder film is the film that's in the movie JFK that you get to see Kennedy getting his brains blown out. And Jim Garrison, the DA, had asked for the tape, and they gave it to him. They wouldn't give him Oswald's W-2 forms, but they gave him the Zapruder film because they wanted him to see it, because they had altered it to eliminate the limousine stop. That's something I wanted to make sure that we talk about. The limousine stopped in front of the grassy knoll for 6 seconds. Senator Yarborough, sitting next to Lyndon Johnson, 50 feet behind John Kennedy, was on with Geraldo Rivera and just angry as hell about how the limousine stopped for 6 seconds in front of the grassy knoll. He wrote it up in his Warren Commission affidavit that the limousine stopped for 6 seconds in front of the grassy knoll. All 5 motorcycle cops said so. Walter Cronkite said so. 4 news people who were there on the scene seeing it have said so on camera. But that's not in the Zapruder film. Anyway, this friend of mine showed it to me, and I went down to the library the next day and got out every book they had by Mark Lane and Jim Garrison, and came home and read them, and started doing presentations at UCLA and at UC Santa Cruz, and anybody who would listen, I would talk to about what the truth was in the Kennedy assassination. And, here I am, this guy, history is my thing, and I'm really, dedicated, whatever. It's what I do for fun. But so now I'm racing down this path, and it's just been, I won't say I took 30 years off, but I spent 30 years teaching the gifted children at the most impoverished schools in Los Angeles, the high schools. These kids know that the media lies, right? They see very, very clearly. They get daily lessons as they see their own experience presented on the television, and it's all lies. They recognize that the truth is out there, but you got to look for it, because it ain't out there where you can see it. Anyway, and so I got to polish, if you'll pardon my saying so, I got to polish my public speaking skills, talking to these guys. And another thing about it is that I discovered as a teacher that you can't teach if you don't have people's attention. And if you do have people's attention, if you're the most interesting guy in the room, people will tell the guy who's goofing around to shut up and be quiet, because they want to hear what Hankey's trying to teach them about. Right. Anyway, so
quick question. I have a quick question for
you.
Go
ahead.
You were able to interact with the youth. Do you think there's hope for the youth? I mean, a lot of people are pretty disparaged about the millennials, and you get into the college, and then you're just totally brainwashed. And do you think there's hope? Do you think that our legacy of truth telling and truth seeking will carry on, or is it over with us? Are we the dinosaurs?
Well, I would encourage people to go to my Facebook page, John Hankey, or to let me think. Um, I don't know that I posted it on my YouTube site, and I should. Anyway, there is a new movie that was made by a bunch of college kids called Israelism, and the star of the movie is a young woman who was well, it's made by, there's a collective of people, and all of them were raised Jewish and were bombarded with all of this pro-Zionist garbage, and then they went to college and they, would walk into a class and the professor, the one guy tells the story, he wanted to be a documentary filmmaker, and so he was planning to make this documentary on Israel for his class, and the teacher said, well, you should read a book about Palestine. um, and he wasn't trying to attack Zionism or anything else, but he said, if you're going to do a video on a subject, you don't, and there's two sides, you don't just read one side, you read both. And so I think the guy read Edward Said, but it doesn't matter. The young woman got recruited from going to school in the United States. I think she says that like 30% of her graduating class went to the IDF. It might be 10%. It's at least 10%. So all these guys, including her, go to Israel and join the IDF and get sent to the West Bank and are just, oh my God, what side are we on? Wait a minute. I didn't come here to do this. I didn't come here to oppress people and murder people and steal their land. And I didn't come here to rub shoulders with racists and to celebrate racism. And she came back, and they all had similar experiences.
They call the Palestinian dogs.
The point is that in this video, there's some really high-ranking Zionist in the Israeli government, and he says, we aren't losing the youth, we have lost the youth.
Nice.
Yes, so that's the answer to your question, is that our salvation is in the youth, and always has been. I mean, geez Louise, 150 years ago, there was slavery in this country. And look at the progress is generation to generation. It's always the youth that really enforce the change, right? That really bring the change into fruition. And this, I'm very, very pleased, right? Between Black Lives Matter and, oh my goodness, the people out in the street, the Jewish youth out in the street, calling for justice for Palestinians is really, really heart lifting, spirit lifting, heartwarming. So yeah, and TikTok. Do you didn't you see poor little Nikki Haley complaining that her children are watching TikTok and learning the truth about Palestine? She can't stand it. That's horrible. And
right.
Should I say this? You can cut it out. I'll say it and you can cut it out. The Chinese, the Wuhan labs, the Chinese understood that they would be accused of engaging in bioweapons. And so they had the French come in and design it. And then they had scientific teams from every country, including the United States. They had a bunch of American scientists, but they were filled to the rafters with foreign observers because they wanted everybody to know what we are doing is completely above board. And if you want to look into who is developing bioweapons, why don't you look at the 3,000 absolutely secret weapons labs that the United States has? And
you bring up a very interesting point with Wuhan, because if you go, I believe it was South Carolina was the first lab to develop the corona type virus. They got caught, I think it was against the NIH guideline, which they don't care. You go down to Texas A&M and then you can go get there's anthrax viruses and all kinds of bioweapons there, in a level 4 or whatever security lab. And
well, I don't mean to go down that road.
Well, no, I just want to pick your brain on it. What do you do? So you're telling me that what we're being told, that the CDC moved that research over to Wuhan, that's not true. Is that what you're saying?
Jeffrey Sachs, I've mentioned him to you a couple of times, and everybody in your audience should get out a pen and write down Jeffrey Sachs and then look at this guy. But he's a Columbia professor. He's a UN official. He was the financial advisor to Gorbachev and everybody who succeeded Gorbachev for 20 years. And he's close friends with all the European leaders, including Angela Merkel. And the Lancet is perhaps the most prestigious medical journal on the planet. And the Lancet said, we need to look into the origin of the COVID virus. And there's so much contentiousness about this. Let's hire Jeffrey Sachs to chair the team. And so they hired Jeffrey Sachs to chair the team, and Jeffrey Sachs chaired the team, and they asked the Chinese to show them their documents, and the Chinese showed them all their documents, and they wanted to interview the people involved, and the Chinese let them interview all of the people involved from all these different countries. And then they asked the US, 3,000 different programs, can we see one of them? No. And Sachs told The Intercept, I think. The Intercept is very mainstream, but it's extremely on the, they do very, very important work. They do very, very dangerous, important work. The stuff that they've done on Gaza is just really, really great stuff. And for example, right, the story about the babies, 20 babies who got their heads cut off. They sent somebody to Israel who went in and talked to the head of the IDF and said, and the government, right? They're talking to the highest people in the government saying, show us the pictures, making those people say, we don't have any. And then printing that. So Jeffrey Sachs told, I think, The Intercept, that based on his research, he feels very, very certain that COVID came from a US bioweapons lab. And certainly, if you do, this is one of the things I did, but mRNA vaccines are Manhattan Project. They are, hydrogen bomb. They are man walking on the moon. They are the result of 20 years of intensive work. mRNA, you'll notice that in 3 years since the first mRNA vaccine, which supposedly was produced in 2 weeks, there hasn't been another one.
Right.
They've produced the first one in 2 weeks, and they haven't produced a single other one, because the first one was the result of 20 years of work in US bioweapons labs. And I could go on and on and on about the subject. I really, really could. If you Google COVID inside job, you might be able to find my video. It might be on, right, it's been suppressed and taken down from so many places, I kind of got tired. There's a place called darkroom.film that I know has it, but I don't know if you can get into the website. They may make you watch a commercial anyway. My point was this one, that the Chinese were incredibly circumspect. And with TikTok, the Chinese they hired an American company to create their algorithm, right? So the Chinese government doesn't run TikTok, and they didn't create the software for it. The software that runs TikTok was created by an American company that the Chinese hired. And if you want to see the algorithm, they will show it to you. But so the point was that Nikki Haley is really upset that her children are watching TikTok and learning the truth about Palestine. So I'm very encouraged about the youth. And
Nice.
Judging from my own children as well, I'm very encouraged about the youth. There's a bunch of smart kids running around.
Nice. Glad to hear that. I heard you. We might go separate ways on this one, because I believe that most groups that we see today are divide and conquer tactics. You mentioned BLM almost in a good light, and for my viewers' sake, now I want to say something to the viewers. I met this man. Billy Ray from AU got us in contact because I was listening to him talk on America Unplugged, and I'm like, this guy's very smart. He knows a lot about the central banking system, and everybody that watches my show knows that is the head of the snake. That's who I go after most of the time, because they're the producers of everything, of all the things we hate. So if me and John disagree on something, or if you disagree on something, ladies and gentlemen, you meet someone that might not have your view on a particular subject or anything, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I just had almost an hour conversation with Mr. Hankey before we started, recording this interview, and we see eye to eye on probably 90% of things. So in this world of divide and conquer, ladies and gentlemen, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. If someone has a different view, listen to them. Maybe they'll tell you something you don't know. And don't forget to make that bridge, meet that guy or that girl in the center of that bridge and agree on the things you agree upon, and maybe disagree and agree to disagree. But don't foster a hate or automatically, oh, whatever that guy says is not, I'm not going to listen because he doesn't, I don't like BLM and he does, or whatever the case may be. That's one of the reasons that we talk to people and we have a discourse. We learn things from each other, and then we find where we can meet, because we are all under attack by the same people, and they don't care if you're left, right, brown, black, brown, Jew, Christian, Muslim. They don't care what you are. They want us dead. They want to run the system into the ground, and we're all being attacked by the same people. I'm sorry, John. I just want to. So BLM. You kind of mentioned that almost in a good light.
Let me throw in my 2 cents on what you just said, which is that
Sure.
I don't learn anything talking to somebody who agrees with me about everything. I'm not interested in getting together with people and patting each other on the back.
Right.
I'm interested in learning stuff, and you can't learn anything from somebody who knows what you know and agrees with you on everything that you know about. And I'll throw out an example. I don't know if you have fans of the Nazis in your base, and I don't know if you have fans of Holocaust deniers. I have lived in a neighborhood that was full of people with numbers tattooed on their arms, Holocaust survivors. And one of my best friends' mother and father-in-law were survivors from Auschwitz. So I'm not friendly with the idea of someone who's a Holocaust denier. I have too much of my background. Well, so there's some idiot in England. His first name is David. Maybe that's his last name? I don't know, and it doesn't matter. He's the most famous Holocaust denier there is. And he points out that he says the Germans didn't have, they were losing the war on the Russian front. How are they going to take troops away? How are they going to divert trains? That the soldiers on the Russian front are freezing to death, and they're going to divert trains that these need to be supplying these guys with fuel and blankets, and they're going to divert them to killing people who are working in defense factories so they can train them, right? Train them into Auschwitz and the other death camps. That doesn't make any sense. Says, and it's true, it doesn't. There's no getting around that fact. That doesn't make any sense. And here's another one for you. I don't remember if he said this or if I found it out on my own, but there was a meeting for planning the Holocaust, the Wannsee Conference, and it was originally planned for Pearl Harbor Day, and they canceled it, which means that when they finally did have the meeting, Germany was now at war with the United States. They were losing on the Russian front. They were now at war with the United States, and out of those meetings came plans to build the death camps, demands on engineering firms to design the ovens, and they began the Holocaust in earnest when it was now clear to anybody with any brains at all that they were gonna lose the war. What friggin' sense does that make? Well, I want another program you'll have me on and we'll talk about, I guess I'm going to throw this in. Everybody's heard of Auschwitz. Maybe you've heard of IG Farben, but if you Google IG Farben, you will find out that IG Farben ran Auschwitz. IG Farben was the richest company on the planet. The Rockefellers were junior partners at Auschwitz. And the IG Farben headquarters is built on the Rothschild estate. You can, anyway. So it's a complicated world, and you need to learn to people. You need to listen to people who don't agree with you if you want to find out about some of the stuff that's going to take you down really, really, really an interesting path. Anyway, my neighborhood where I live, when I was teaching, right? My students were primarily African American, and eventually Los Angeles has been shifting over the course of the last 50 years. South Central has become predominantly Latino. It was previously predominantly Black, of course. But these are my people, and in my neighborhood, my neighbors are they used to be very predominantly African American, and the neighborhood is changing. But let me say that you can point Black Lives Matter, I think in Los Angeles, is in trouble for being corrupt. The leadership of Black Lives Matter is in trouble for being corrupt. And if anybody wants to complain about Black Lives Matter, okay, fine. I don't really have a problem with that. But I mean, surely you don't think George Floyd deserved the death that he got, right? And I know for a fact, Jesus, for the last 30 years, I'd have my students, every day I'm getting to hear from my students about their abuse at the hands of the LAPD. So that I'm very, very sympathetic with the notion that in Los Angeles, in any case, and I have a suspicion other places as well, the police do not treat poor Black and brown citizens the way they should, and they certainly don't treat them the way they treat the citizens in the wealthier neighborhoods.
John, now see, and this is the thing, okay? My thing is this. I think Black Lives Matter, I think they maybe could have came up with a little bit of a different name, because I agree with everything you just said. The name is kind of inflammatory, so I'm suspicious
Sure, you're
of
right. That's right. It could have been All Lives Matter, and there wouldn't have been a problem with
I'm
that.
just suspicious of its origin. And I can tell you this. Now I have had the privilege.
That's interesting.
I just had this conversation with someone earlier. He's a constitutional historian, and we were talking about another individual I know. And I'm like, he on Twitter, he's constantly posting this stuff of a bunch of Black kids beating up a white kid, right? Or and I always comment on his posts, and I'm like, hey, Black people are being fed the exact opposite thing, the exact same thing, only it's white kids. Are you still with me, John?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You look like you're froze. It's white kids beating up a Black kid, or Black cops doing something to a Black person. Now, I've lived a very colorful life, to say the least. I've been in federal prison. I was a drug addict, so I was in the streets of Detroit at a very young age. My best friend is from Detroit. He's a half Black, half Puerto Rican guy. He calls me the N-word. That's like I say, dude, right? So you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
So I've seen what happened to the Black community. There's a problem there where they went through all of this stuff through history, and their story is a beautiful American story, right? They went into slavery, they got out of it, they started farms, they started working in industry, they started being professionals. We've had a Black president, there's Black brain surgeons, on and on and on. Okay, but something happened. Okay, and I believe this is more of a governmental thing. They took the Black man out of the family with the drug laws. They dumped a culture that is not their culture by nature into their society. Okay, and now I can tell I'm terra firma. We call it the hood out here. I've been in the hood, I've lived in the hood, I know the hood. It's like an Indian reservation. They don't leave there. The education there is horrible. It's horrible. Most of the people in Detroit, in our neighborhoods, they can't even speak proper English. They won't be able to get a job because they can't, their vernacular is so horrible, and nobody teaches them anything. All they know is the culture that's there. And that has been done on purpose. That's not a mistake. See, but here's the kicker about this. That culture has trickled down into mainstream culture. So I feel like the Black people in this country, and I don't like, they're Americans, right? They're not anything other than an American. I'm not an Italian American. You're not a German American. We're Americans. We live in this country. That's what we should be saying. They have been under attack, and the position that they're in, they have been put in. My only gripe now at this point is we need to start educating them that, hey, the culture that you have received, this urban culture, this lifestyle that a lot of them fall into, unfortunately, which gets them incarcerated, it's all a plan. It's all been done to you on purpose. And I think a lot of them are waking up. You got people, and I'm not a big Farrakhan fan, but you guys like Farrakhan, and I'm not a fan of the Black Hebrews either, okay, because they're kind of hateful as well. They're waking people up in a kind of way that's not the greatest in the world, but at least the information's starting to trickle down where they know, hey, we're better than this. What do you think about what I just said? Am I off base, or because I don't know how it is today. Detroit is like an animal of its own.
Well, there's a lot to be said. There's a lot of truth in what you said. And the thing that got me when you first started was that it struck me that you and I both agree that one of the central tactics that the 0.00001%, the quadrillionaires, use against the masses of people globally is divide and rule. And when I hear you say Black Lives Matter, it strikes me that if those guys could have come up with that name, right? If what you're trying to do is to create a movement that will make white people feel disassociated from it, that's a good name. And in any case, you know, in Los Angeles, the leaders of Black Lives Matter have gotten into trouble for being corrupt and using money to buy houses and whatnot. But the heroes, I mean, you know, I protested against the Vietnam War. I got chased and clubbed and gassed and arrested protesting against the Vietnam War. And I know what it's like to face the police, and it's not fun. And I admire anybody who's willing to do it for a good cause. And I know that, you know, since Rodney King, the Rodney King was not an aberration, right? And for people who may not remember, there were like 40 cops who just beat the crap out of this guy.
Yeah.
For speeding in his Honda, right? He must have been going 75 miles an hour. Anyway, but that wasn't an aberration. What was new about the Rodney King beating was that video cameras had just been invented. And the guy in the apartment across the street had one. He had a Betamax and he stuck it out the window and he videotaped this. And then, you know, and so that's a huge step forward, right? The fact that everybody has a phone in their camera, that's a huge step forward. But I agree that anybody who wants to try to make the world and our society a better place, one of their primary considerations should be, how can we make sure that what we do doesn't get used by the bad guys and their media to divide people rather than to get people to join around the issues that we share in common. As I am hearing myself say that, I'm remembering that Martin Luther King called up Lyndon Johnson. They were trying to get the Voting Rights Act passed. And Lyndon Johnson told Martin Luther King, get your people out in the street and get them protesting, because when the cops come out with their fire hoses and their dogs, the average guy sitting on a tractor looks at that and says, well, that ain't right. And, you know, I think 99% of human beings have a good heart. We don't like seeing injustice. We don't like seeing the cops beat the crap out of some unarmed person who was trying to mind their own business, or maybe doing some, you know, minor infraction that they didn't deserve to die for. Anyway, you know, I taught English in the inner city for 30 years. So I got a lot.
Do you get what I'm saying? I mean, out here, it's a damn shame. It broke my heart, John, when I thought about that.
So let me, here's I think a better response to that than what I might have said until I remembered to say this. 60 years ago, 50 years ago, 50 years ago, there was a movement to, right, Martin Luther King was still alive, I think, to demand that the auto factories have an integrated workforce, and that the rubber factories have an integrated workforce, and so on and so on. And 40 years ago, that started happening. And 35 years ago, it became the way of doing business. And, you know, I worked at Lockheed, and Lockheed was, they were federal contractors. They had to have an integrated workforce, and they did. And it was really, really interesting working there, because there were white people who had never had a friendly relationship with a non-white person before, and they're standing next to each other and working together all day long, and they're laughing and joking, and they're genuinely friends. Real friendships came out of that. Anyway, it was a beautiful thing to watch. And then they shut all those factories down, every single one of them, right? 150,000 jobs left Los Angeles. Well, you don't have to speak like, well, nobody speaks like William Shakespeare anyway, but you don't have to. I used to tell my students, and it's true, and this is an interesting story. So you know why four-letter words are dirty words?
No.
Because they're Anglo-Saxon. The Latin, the way the Romans said fornicate was sexual intercourse. I think that's 6 syllables, as opposed to the F word. The F word is Anglo-Saxon, and if you say the F word in court, your butt's going to jail. But if you say sexual intercourse, you're not in any kind of trouble whatsoever. And 1700 years ago, the Romans, if you spoke Anglo,
you're a barbarian.
1066, 1,000 years ago, if you spoke, and for the 10,000 years ago, and for the last 1,000 years, if you speak Anglo-Saxon in England, you're an ignorant lout. You're a scumbag. You're a worthless piece of crap who shouldn't have the right to vote. And we're going to throw you off your land, and we're going to make you live in the most incredible squalor, and we're going to have sheep on your land, or whatever. The point is that English peasants had no rights for the last 1,000 years, including up until today. I guess maybe they have a few more, but the point is that the English teacher was a policeman, and he was there to enforce the ruling elite's form of language. However the king speaks, I don't know if you know this, however the king speaks, that's proper. And if the king starts using the F word, well, then the F word's going to be proper. And if he doesn't, then it's not going to be proper. But the English teachers are the language police, and they're there to enforce the manner of speech of the ruling elite and demand that everybody else learn that form of speech. And I could go on for another 20 minutes about and I can cite all sorts of linguistic experts to tell you that African American speech is richer, it's more powerful, it's more efficient than the language of the ruling elites. And it's more artistic, which is why all the artists like to copy it, especially the language artists, who are the rap artists, like to copy it. So you have all these white rap artists who are, I don't want to say stealing, but they are allowing themselves to be educated at the school of inner city speech patterns. It's not an inferior language, and if you're trying to work on a automobile assembly line, it's a perfectly adequate form of language. And if you're trying to be a language artist, it might be arguably a superior form of speech, but I'm not interested, certainly not in using words like superior in this, but it certainly is legitimate. And, you know, I would teach all of that to my students, that this is the situation. I'm the language police. It's not fair, but it's how it is. And I'm not here to tell you that the way you speak is wrong, and the way your mother speaks is wrong, and the way your grandmother speaks is wrong. Those are not wrong. They are different languages, and they have a set of rules, right? There's a set of rules, and Chomsky is one of the first guys to say that the language patterns of inner city speakers follow a different set of rules, and an arguably superior set of rules. But they shut down all the factories, and then the CIA brought in, you know who Gary Webb is? The CIA brought cocaine into the inner city in military transport planes.
Well, the CIA also introduced the gangster rap and what I feel like I disagree a little bit with you. The dulling down of the language is, unfortunately,
Oh,
I'm in my point of view. I get what you're saying, but it. So we have this
hang
world
on a
that you
second.
have
Hang on
to
a
be
second.
able to
Hang on.
articulate
Hang on.
yourself.
Death Row Records is a CIA operation. That's
Absolutely,
absolutely the case. That's absolutely the
absolutely.
case. NWA, those, Dr. Dre was never a gangster. Dr. Dre never lived in the
Have you ever
hood.
heard him speak like not like normal? He's very articulated.
Oh yeah.
He's a master of the English language.
Oh yeah. But he hooked up with Eazy-E, and Eazy-E plus Dr. Dre, and goddamn, you got 8 Ball Rolling and Boys in the Hood, and that is some powerful stuff. And it's
Wait,
new. It's completely original, and it's powerful, and it's and oh my goodness, it's such an accurate reflection of life in the hood that the kids in the hood heard it and say, damn, somebody's talking about me.
yeah,
My life is on the radio for the first time that I've ever heard. You know, screw Pat Boone. My life is on the radio.
yeah.
Love
That's
letters in the sand. My life is on the radio.
what a fascinating perspective on that. See, that's very and here's the thing. I might disagree with you a little bit, man. And again, to the viewers, the point, one of the great thing about having this guy on, number one, not only is he super smart, okay, he knows a lot of history, but we can have this conversation. We agree on a lot of stuff, but we're having this conversation. I'm learning things from him. He might be maybe learning things from me. This is what we need to do to beat the evil. Love will conquer evil. Tolerance, and I don't mean tolerance in the sense of a leftist tolerance where equity and equality are two different things in my mind, but tolerance of one another's perspectives and life experiences that make up an individual. Like Mr. Hankey said, I have an Oriental friend. We did a lot of fireworks business. We're in a small town in Indiana. I have my hat to the side just because, and it's a Slayer hat. It has nothing to do with, rap or anything like that, right? My hat's to the side. He's got a big silver chain around his neck. I had my silver chain on my neck. We got pulled over. The town we grew up in Canton, Michigan, if you're driving a crappy car, black, white, or whatever, you're getting pulled over. I get mistaken for Arab or Arabic or Mexican or Latino of some sort, and I get pulled over because of the way I look. I got pulled over out here in the country where I live a couple months ago. I had my pit bull in my Mercedes, and I'm driving down the road in my Mercedes, not doing a damn thing, and I got pulled over for nothing. This is a real thing, and I think a lot of people who live in the suburbs or live out in the country, they've never had these experiences. They don't understand. They don't have the perspective, and they're not. So what they're fed through the media, they have this false, image of what actually is going on. Try living in an area where it's violent. There's garbage all over the ground. You have to protect yourself most of the time. And then just think about what that's like for a minute. Your mom's raising you. Your dad might have been in jail because he was trying to raise you. Do you get where I'm going with this, John? I mean, you have to
Oh
be
yeah, and I appreciate it.
you have to be able to put yourselves, I said this on my radio show the other night. You got to be able to put yourselves in other people's shoes. If we don't use love and a little bit of tolerance with each other, the bastards win. The banking cabal, the Rothschild cabal, all these things that we rail against, they win. When they keep us divided, we're useless to each other.
And they work hard to keep us divided. They are not casual in their approach to keeping us divided.
No.
It's probably their highest priority. Well,
really quick, can I ask you a Kennedy question?
Please.
I'm sorry, man, dude. Your brain is just, there's so much in there. I'm like,
Oh my
extract.
God.
So this is probably a very basic question for you. What the hell happened to his body in between like 6:30 and what was it, 7 p.m. or something? His body disappeared for a while. What happened there?
Well,
You know what I'm referring to?
Yeah, we can answer that question without really. I've been doing this for 70 years. Well, I'm sorry, for 50 years, 50 hardcore years. I've been chasing this damn rabbit down the damn hole. And your audience should know, I feel like I got there. I got to the bottom of it. And it's Harriman and the Rothschilds. But let's go back to what happened to Kennedy's body. So Kennedy is in Parkland Memorial Hospital, and the doctors declare him dead. And the doctors walk out into the press coverage and they say, let's get the right hand, that he had an entrance wound here. Kennedy's press secretary says, and he's talking to Tom Weicker from the New York Times. It's a simple matter, Tom, of a bullet right through the head. He had an entrance wound here, and he had a giant hole in the back of his head. Now, I think you were saying something off the air probably about how the government comes up with a plan, or whoever, any big organization comes up with a plan, and it doesn't, when the rubber meets the road, things go unpredictably, right? So they had this plan to assassinate Kennedy. They weren't supposed to stop the limousine in front of the grassy knoll, but if they left Dealey Plaza with Kennedy wounded, they would have had to shoot him. He couldn't survive having gone through this. And if they had to shoot him, they would have had to shoot Jackie. And if they had to shoot Jackie, they probably would have had to shoot Mrs. Connolly. I don't think they would have had to shoot John Connolly, but they might have had to shoot Mrs. Connolly, but they certainly would have had to shoot Jackie. So they stopped the limousine and they waited for 6 seconds. Okay, we're going to set all that aside. We could talk about it for 10 minutes easy. But anyhow, back to Parkland Hospital. They had a plan, right? That we will steal the body and we will take it and we will alter the wounds to make it look like he was shot from behind. So you steal the body, yeah, but he's got a fist-sized hole in the back of his head. What are you gonna do about that? Anyway, he had an entrance wound right here. And what they did is it looks like they got a Boy Scout knife, and they made a really, really ragged, not ragged, but sloppy, amateur looking tear of the skin from that hole. And then they put the body, I'm sorry, but how did that happen? Well, clearly. So they put Kennedy's body in the bronze ceremonial casket. This guy, David Lifton, if you really, really, really want to know about what happened to the body, to answer your question, read David Lifton, Lifton. He's written a couple of books, and they're all really, really excellent. And he went out and he interviewed the guy who put Kennedy's head in the bronze casket, and he videotaped the interview with the guy who put Kennedy in the bronze ceremonial casket. And he says to the guy, are you sure? How can you remember? How can you be so positive? And the guy says, I got his blood on my shirt. Okay, it was a memorable experience, getting the blood from the president's head on my shirt.
How can you remember?
Well, no, but it's a good question. No, don't get. He's trying to make sure he's trying to ask the questions that the people who attack him will ask, right? So that's all he's doing. And so then he goes to Bethesda, and he talks to the guy who took Kennedy's body out of the casket, and the guy says, and it's in my movie, you get to see both of these guys in my movie, Breakthrough, JFK, murder charged, the assassination solved. Anyway, the guy, Paul O'Connor, is the technician in Bethesda who unloaded Kennedy's body from a pinkish gray shipping casket. It was in a body bag. And Lifton, the author, says, did you get the blood on him? And the guy says he was in a pinkish gray shipping casket. You're not going to get blood on you. I'm sorry, he was in a body bag. You're not going to get blood on you, lifting him out of a body bag. Anyhow, the point is that somehow it seems to me extremely unlikely that Kennedy's body I don't think it could have happened. It had to have happened on the plane, that he got switched from a bronze casket. they may have thrown him in a body bag and thrown him off the plane, because when he got there, he also had the top of his head was bashed in when he got to the autopsy. Say the autopsy doctors and whatever. But Lifton did this. Did Lifton do this? No, doesn't matter. But these dirty bastards, PBS, right? Frontline, those people, they did a show called Who Shot President Kennedy? And it's narrated by Walter Cronkite. And it's just the most slick, deceptive piece of crap. It's a monument to the art of lying. But they, if you're going to persuade people, you have to put on all of the trappings of honesty. So they went and they interviewed the Dallas emergency room doctors. And David Lifton has written this explosive book charging that the body was stolen. Well, he's kind of proved that the body was stolen. He's certainly proved that the body was stolen. And Lifton also said, he cites an FBI memo that says, an FBI memo. The FBI were the good guys in this story. The FBI memo says that there was surgery to the head area had been performed. The FBI guys are at the autopsy and they see Kennedy's body wheeled in, having been pulled out of the body bag, and they look and they see this body has been operated on. And being really, 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 really competent agents, they wrote a report that Hoover got within hours, minutes probably, saying that Kennedy's body had been operated on. And they brought Nova, it was Nova, PBS. They brought the doctors in from Dallas. They brought them into Washington. They brought them to the National Archives. They showed them the photographs that were taken of Kennedy's body immediately before the autopsy, because you can't take pictures of the body after the autopsy. It's all cut up. So you have to take it. It's absolutely ironclad or in stone routine that this is what you do. You take the body and you photograph before the autopsy starts. So there are these photographs of Kennedy's body before the autopsy started, and one of the doctors, and it's in my video, looks at the photograph and says, this thing somebody's cut it. His body's pretty much the same as I remember it, the guy, except for this, except for one thing that demonstrates that the body was stolen and operated on before the autopsy started. Except for that, it's pretty much, he's still got 2 arms and 2 legs. The toes are all there. Anyway, so did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. You did.
Okay.
They stole the body and they manipulated the wounds.
They did the best that they could, which was not very good. It was, what are you going to do? They were asked to do an impossible job. And so, this is a story worth telling. So, during the autopsy, one of the doctors takes there's a flap, right? The skin didn't get blown off. The skull and brains got blown out, but the skin was still attached to Kennedy's head. And one of the doctors reaches and he takes the flap and he puts it back into place and holds it there while somebody takes a picture of it, so that they've hidden the giant hole, more or less, that was in the back of Kennedy's head. But you see the guy's hand sitting there and it's very clear what's going on. But so then they hand that photograph to an artist and say, redraw this and make it look like there's just this little hole as described in the autopsy that the military wrote before the autopsy began. Draw that picture for us. And Walter Cronkite, in this Nova video, it's called Who Shot President Kennedy? And you can probably find it online. As Cronkite is presenting it early in the video, he calls it a drawing. This drawing was authorized by Congress and shows a apparently small wound in the back of Kennedy's head. And at the end of the program, at the climax of the program, they show you the drawing again. And Cronkite says, the doctor said he had this giant hole, but what about this photo? Says Cronkite, showing a small hole in the back of Kennedy's head. It's been miraculously transformed from being a drawing to being a photo. And anyway.
Wow. Well, yeah, I wonder if the viewers caught that when they were watching.
Of course not. Of course not. Are you kidding me? I didn't catch it until I had watched it 30 times.
Wow.
But, right? I videotaped the program and I watched it 30 times, and then well, I'll tell you, I would present a lesson to my students. I would show them the original, and I hand out a questionnaire, 10 questions, and 1 means you agree with it, 2 you disagree with it, 3 you were confused and you don't know, and 4 was I don't know what. Anyway, and I showed it to them, and a large segment of the population of the kids would be persuaded by the lies, and then I made another version, and I just cut out all the lies. I left in all the powerful evidence where the doctor says, yes, the wound's been altered, and I showed them if you are allowed to see something without having Walter Cronkite yell in your ear that what you're looking at is actually right, if you're able to see it with an unfiltered, unpoisoned view, and then I'd give them the thing again, and of course, very, very different responses from the kids, right? That they could see the truth, and they could see what was the truth and what was a lie, and so on and so on. But they still do that, by the way.
No, I was we were talking off air in a little bit, and you said, they have, people that are psychiatrists, they know how to manipulate minds and what people think. We have everything from predictive programming to I mean, it was simple. They showed the drawing, and then by the end of the show, it was a photo. Your mind is set in a certain way. Your subconscious stores a lot of different things. I'm arguing with people over this Mandela effect that everybody's talking about. I don't believe in the Mandela effect. I believe it's
I
just a
forget what
mind
it
trick.
is. I used to know what the Mandela effect is. What is it?
Well, okay, here's an example of the Mandela effect, and I kind of disproved it with a guy. We were online, and I was showing. So you remember Ed McMahon handing out the Publishers Clearinghouse checks?
Okay, sure, of course.
They say that didn't happen. So if you go and you look on the computer, you can't find Ed McMahon handing out Publishers Clearinghouse checks. Now, they're saying that because they have this CERN collider. Have you heard about that? Where they're
Yes.
colliding atoms and creating heavy, atoms, which I don't think we should be playing with that stuff. Children in a nuclear power plant pressing buttons. That's what these scientists are. But anyway, so they're saying that when they created this heavy atom, it threw us into an alternate reality. I don't have time for this ridiculous shit because we have inflation eating eating us alive, and we need to be astute of what's going on, in the real world. But so this is fantasy to me. But I looked into this on the computer. I could not find a video of him handing out a check for Publishers Clearinghouse. I could find him in a video handing a check for ASH Clearinghouse or something like that. So it was very similar. But here's the kicker. Everybody, this one example, well, he never worked for Publishers Clearinghouse. He was the CEO and one of the founding members of Publishers Clearinghouse. So they think this Mandela effect is these things that happen, but because we're living in an alternate reality, there's no record of them anymore. That's horseshit. And even if it's true, pardon my French, I don't mean to get my vernacular to go into the English language or the Anglo-Saxon language there, but we have real problems. We have GMO food that's horrible for you. Okay, causes cancer. We've got EMF, which is not good for you. There's evidence is astounding on that, like the JFK thing. We have all this we have a central bank printing money who we don't know who the owners are, although we really do. Okay. And our money is being turned into nothing. We are debt slaves. We're being turned into we're going to be turned into serfs here. We're worse than serfs, a feudal system. We're going backwards here. All right. And you're worried about lizard people and the Mandela effect. How the hell is that going to help us right now? Focus on your own life, trying to improve yourself and putting yourself in a position to survive the economic disaster that is clearly coming like a freight train. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go on that tangent, but it irritates me.
Well, but I think that let's get back to the Zapruder film for just 1 minute.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Well,
I'm sorry, John.
No. It's because it's right along the same lines. Everybody has seen the Zapruder film. Nobody knows that it's been altered, right? Walter Cronkite said the limousine stopped, but nobody knows that. In my video, you get to hear him say it, right? There's these 4 reporters who all saw it, and you get to hear Senator Yarborough, who, you know, was, like I say, was 50 feet away. Now, is everybody paying attention? Because this is, you need to be paying attention. They cut out the limousine stopping, and they left in the shot from the front. Now, in my video, you get to see a version that I made that removes the limousine, that puts in the limousine stopping and turns the shot from the front into a shot from the rear. It would be, I've been making videos for close to 30 years, and 20 years hardcore, and I'm getting pretty good at this manipulation of video and animation and stuff. And it took me 10 hours to produce a copy of the Zapruder film where Kennedy's body moves forward instead of backward to the left. And the version that you see in the movie would have been much better if I had had a good copy of the Zapruder film. I mean, all I got is the crap that is available today, but the crap that is available today has been manipulated many, many, many times, and it's a copy of a copy of a copy. The point is that, why did they leave in the shot from the front, which would have been easily removed when they took out the limousine stop, which I have a hard time figuring out how they could possibly have done that. And I think that they must have driven the limousine on a different day. They must have driven the empty limousine down the street in order to have that stock footage and then be able to manipulate it. But the point is, why did they leave in the shot from the front? Are you paying attention? And I'm going to save you 10 years of thinking about it, which I spent. They left in the shot from the front. Well, they left in the shot from the front. We don't have Oswald's W-2s, right, which would show that he worked for both the FBI and the CIA. We don't have those, but they gave us the Zapruder film that shows, oh, it's just brutal, right? That Kennedy's getting his brains blown all over his wife, and the horror that his wife has to go through. It's the most, if there was anything that you were going to shelter the Kennedy family from, it would be showing that horror, sharing that, making public that private horror that Jackie had to go through. But they showed it to us because they wanted us to see that Kennedy was shot from the front. Why did they want us to see that Kennedy was shot from the front? Because they wanted us to know that the Warren Commission conclusions were lies. Why did they want us to know that the Warren? Because they wanted us to think Johnson did it. Why did they want us to think Johnson did it? Because they wanted the Democratic base, who had liked Johnson before they saw the Zapruder film and saw that the Warren Commission and everything Johnson had said was a lie. They wanted them to not vote so that Nixon could get elected, and that's what happened. But, right, you see, it was a psychological operation worthy of Cambridge Analytica. They waged psychological warfare on you and me and everybody who's ever seen the Zapruder film. They screwed us right between the ears, right in your brain. They got in there and just raped your understanding of the world and how it works. And they do that all the time. 9/11, right? 9/11 was a terror psychological operation. Everybody saw those towers come down and 3,000 people died instantly. And it just, what a horror, what a trauma. And all of it to make us hate Arabs so that we would support a war against Saddam Hussein.
Yeah.
Right?
And none of it made sense.
Well, and against Afghanistan?
Yeah, that's what I mean. None of it made sense. It was supposedly, they said they were Saudi Arabian terrorists, and that bin Laden, right, the Mujahideen, which we created to give Russia the fits back in the 80s, right? But we went and we go invade Iraq. How does that make sense?
It made sense from the point of view of the war profiteers, who are the bankers that you're constantly talking about. Those are the war profiteers. They not only own the banks, they also own the entire military industrial complex. They don't have their name on the top of the building. They haven't been putting their names on buildings since the First World War. They got blamed largely and rightly for the First World War, and so they started taking a much, much more refined position. But before World War I, the Rothschilds they stomped around Europe like they were the gods of everything. And I started telling you this story. A student of mine sent me this. The Emperor of Austria wanted to borrow money from them, and wanted to borrow not from the British Rothschilds, who are the kings of everything, from the Austrian Rothschilds. They wanted to borrow money, and the lord of the Austrian Rothschilds told the emperor, "You have to promise that you won't tax my railroads." And the emperor responds, "And then you'll give me the loan?" And the Rothschild says, "Oh no, I won't make that promise. You have to take off your clothes and in front of an entire room full of your enemies, kiss my ass up one side, and you have to humiliate yourself in public and say you won't tax my railroads with no strings attached, and then I will consider giving you a loan." Good. I mean, humiliating. This is public, right? Public humiliation of the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, of Austria-Hungary, right? And anyway, so they don't do that anymore. You don't see their name in the paper anymore, unless you're
No, I
reading
don't
about
think they
Epstein.
assassinate people anymore either, John. I think they marginalize information with the psychological COINTEL operations that you were referring to. Like a good
Did you
example.
say they don't assassinate people anymore?
I don't think that's their preferred method of taking out. Okay, a guy like Ron Paul. Nobody knew about the Federal Reserve before Ron. I mean, not
That's
very
not
many.
true. Give me a
The
break.
general public did not know the origins of the Federal Reserve. He was the first person to come on a debate stage in front of the whole country.
You're changing the subject. We were talking about assassinations.
Well,
You're
no,
going to bring it
I'm gonna
back
get
to
to the point.
assassination.
I'm going to get to the point.
Okay.
He was marginalized. Anybody who talks about anything 9/11 truth, any of that, oh, they're whack jobs. They're crazy. They put it out into the aggregate. Nobody listens to you. You might as well be dead if you're trying to pass that information on. That's my point. That's I think they
But they
learned
do
from
assassinate people. Do you understand that they
No, they still
assassinate?
oh, absolutely, absolutely. But
Reporters especially, but Paul Wellstone, right? When I was a teacher, I was always in trouble with one principal. That's not entirely true, but I had one principal who was just, God, what a monster. And in trying to defend kids from this monster, I ended up provoking her to coming after me. And so I got involved with the union and with the lawyer, because she was, trying to, I don't know how much, I don't remember what it was she wanted to do with me, steal a bunch of money or whatever, or transfer me, whatever. But so I'm talking to the union lawyer, and the union lawyer, this is the LA Teachers Union, like 30,000 teachers at least. It's a big, powerful union, so that they are courted by the Democratic Party. And she would get invited to fundraisers that Nancy Pelosi was at. And she said that Nancy Pelosi said within her earshot that they understood that Paul Wellstone had been murdered. Well, I can go into detail. I didn't need to hear it from Nancy Pelosi, but I've heard from 3 other witnesses. This is a story that Nancy Pelosi wants people to know, that the leaders of the Democratic Party, if they cross the line, John Kennedy, for example, and Paul Wellstone, for example, get murdered. And they want them to know that they get murdered. Which is, maybe that's one of the reasons they put in the shot from the front and released it, the Zapruder film, was so that every president since then could watch that and say, oh shit, they sure did blow his brains out, didn't they? And they didn't get caught, did they? Anyway. Oh, Gary Webb was murdered, right?
Absolutely.
Two shots to the head. Well, there's a movie, it's on Netflix, called The War Machine, I think it's called The War Machine. It's Brad Pitt. It's a really, really wonderful movie, and it's based on this story that was written by a Rolling Stone reporter named Michael Hastings.
Yep.
Michael Hastings was murdered.
Yeah, his car blew up in his engine block. They say this is correct me if I'm wrong. His engine block ended up like 500 feet away from the car.
Yes, that's
they're
correct.
They're trying to say that a gasoline explosion in the car did that.
Yes, it was right. It's a late model Mercedes. It's supposed to be the safest car on the road, and he hits a tree. He's driving down the straightest street in Los Angeles. He's driving down the straightest street in Los Angeles and hits a tree. I mean, you could shoot. It's Highland, and you can shoot a bullet from where Highland begins to the Hollywood Bowl. And I'm not exaggerating. It's not a problem. And right, it's gonna. It is straight as a bullet, but he managed to crash his car. Well, it had been taken over, right? The people who did the videos demonstrating that you could take over his car and do with it what they did to him. Anyway, and Gary Webb, two shots to the head, and he didn't get a autopsy.
Are you familiar with Huey Long?
Yes. Well, no. About his murder, I'm not familiar with his murder. I have heard from people who I regarded as reliable that he was murdered, but oh, wait a minute. I'm thinking Huey Newton, Huey Long.
No, Huey Newton was Black Panther's guy.
Yes, who was also, but Huey Long, yes, of course, he tried to tax the railroads in order to build roads and hospitals, and the oil companies, of course, and so they had to kill him.
Yeah, there's another great example. Yeah, I didn't mean they don't assassinate people anymore. I'm saying another tool of theirs.
Go ahead.
Is smearing a group or like the whole conspiracy theory movement. I believe all the lizard people stuff, all the flat earth stuff, all the stuff that they talk about, they do that because you have guys like yourself or guys like me talking about 9/11, talking about the bankers.
Oh my God.
Pulling the veil back, and you pull my video up on Rumble, and underneath me is the Anunnaki are coming to impregnate you with unicorn eggs in your brain, and that's what they do to us, and they shadow ban you, right? I mean,
they get you every way they can, right? They get you every. Oh my God, they go to Amazon and they post criticisms of my movie on Amazon. And by the way, everybody go to Amazon and buy a DVD, and then you can look it up how to do it. But you open up the DVD, you don't open up open it up as a video. You open it up as a file, and you steal the video file out of it, and you put it on your computer, and now you have it. But I want to say that I have this really, brilliant Learning Channel video about how the Lusitania was sunk by the British military, really, really clearly brought down by an explosion that was on board, very, very clearly. You can't get that video for love or money anymore. I have a VHS copy, and I'm going to have to find somebody who can turn it into a digital file for me. But they go after stuff 50 years later and evaporate it. And I guarantee you that in 50 years, you're not going to be able to get my video anywhere. It will have been gone.
Down the memory hole. We're a little bit over an hour. Can you do five more minutes? Because I kind of want to.
Oh, I've got open end.
Okay, cool. And we're going to show everybody where you can get John's video here before he goes. We're going to plug John as much as we can. So we were talking about the central banks, and you touched on something here a couple minutes ago, how they are the military-industrial complex
and big pharma.
How far do their tentacles go? I mean, you mentioned this to me before the show. Tell the good folks what your opinion or what you think, and I agree with you on this.
Well, they're big pharma, they're big agro, they're the big banks, and what did I leave out? And they're the military-industrial complex. And the thing is, and I mentioned to you, and I'll mention to them, Jack London wrote this book, The Iron Heel, and in chapter 6. There's a 4-page footnote. I'm not kidding, about the Rockefellers and about how, because they have all these profits, they have to buy up everything that there is, so that the Rothschilds are worth thousands of trillions of dollars. It's in Swiss banks that you can't learn anything about. It's completely black. But if you study the history of it, in 1825, the Rothschilds took over the Bank of England, which was by far and away, by 1,000 times, the largest financial institution on the planet. So since 1825, they have had the problem of what to do with the trillions of dollars that were rolling in. So, as soon as the inventors of Google were ready to sell, they sold it to them. There's no question that that's who they sold it to. And Netflix, as soon as the people who founded Netflix were ready to sell, that's who they sold it to. And Tesla probably belongs to them at this point, and if it doesn't, it soon will. But right, anything that's out there, because they have all this money, and what are they going to do with it? Well, they buy and 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 they buy. And right, so that once somebody has gone out there and tested the waters and developed something that works, and it really works, and it's really reliable, and then they buy it up. That is to say, the Rothschilds buy it up, because what else are they going to do with this money? Let it sit in a vault and collect dust? No, they have to invest it in something. And in consequence whereof, they buy and they buy and they buy and they buy. And what don't they own? I can't answer that question. Me,
So here's a question for you. Do the bankers, and you're basically telling me that it's the Rothschilds all alone? There's no other, it's not a consortium they did, you know, or a partnership. I mean, because I got to ask you that. Is it all the Rothschilds? Like,
they
it's
need
not the
allies.
Vatican, it's not the Masons, it's, you know, how everybody goes, oh, it's these people, it's that people, and then they focus on one thing.
Man, I'm really glad you asked that question. But it's got two parts to the answer. One is that the Rothschilds need to have allies, right? The Rockefellers are allies of the Rothschilds. Well, they're, you know, they're very, 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 the Rockefellers are very low-ranking allies of the Rothschilds, but they're allies, and they get pushed out in front. Don't look at the Rothschilds, look at the Rockefellers. Don't look at Bill Gates, right? I've never, Bill Gates's story, his origin story, doesn't make any sense to me. He didn't invent DOS. He didn't invent DOS, and IBM couldn't invent DOS. They had to make Gates a billionaire because IBM couldn't invent DOS. But Gates didn't invent DOS.
No,
anyway.
He stole it, from what I learned. He stole
no, I think he stole it. He paid 1/1000th of what it was worth. He paid for it, right? But how was it that he was able to, you know, you get similar questions with Epstein and so on. How was he able to do that? You get the same questions with Israel. There was this really, Frontline has actually done a couple of good things on Israel in the last month. And one of the things is that every US president meets with the president of Israel. And when the president of Israel walks out of the room, the president looks up and says, who's the superpower? Who is this guy who's telling me how it is? And how come I have no power or influence over them? Because, you know, since Carter, at least, they have been pushing for the Palestinians to have a state. And you see how much progress we've made in the last, good gravy, how many years? So on the one hand, the Rothschilds have minions. Allies is probably not the right word, but minions, people that they use to put out in front of them and pretend. So look, you're the Rothschilds or whoever, you know, we don't need to even put a name on it. You're the ruling elite. And how many guys at the table? I don't know, maybe a dozen at the most, and maybe 5. And they're making a decision, oh, we're going to kill Kennedy. Oh, we're going to start this war in Ukraine. We're going to figure out how we're going to send Epstein, and we're going to compromise Biden, and we're going to compromise his son. We're going to compromise somebody so we can tell Biden what to do. And all they really, I don't know, whatever. I don't mean to suggest that things aren't complex and sophisticated and nuanced, but Blinken is freaking AIPAC. Right? The guy who runs U.S. foreign policy is AIPAC to the max. But how did they get him in there? Anyway, you have to, so you make your decisions. Oh, this is the policy we want. How are we going to do that? Well, we're going to get this guy Blinken in, and then we're going to, you know, we're going to put a clamp on Biden's nuts and make sure that he knows that he ain't in charge here. He's going to do what Blinken tells him, or he's going to watch people he cares about die, whatever, you know, whatever the mechanism is. But you have to have, once you've made that decision, you have to have means, a mechanism of carrying it out. And I think at one time in history, there was a group called the Illuminati, whose job was to carry out the instructions of the ruling elite, the London, let's call them the City of London bankers. I rather prefer that term, but the City of London bankers own everything. The United States doesn't exist in terms of what's not owned by them. What's left is nothing. I was mentioning before the show that Jim Mars suggested to me, and it seems very, very clear, that the Rothschilds instigated the Civil War because their power rivals were the slave owners, and they killed them. They broke their backs. And after the Civil War, the bankers, the City of London bankers, through their front men, have run the United States completely, absolutely completely. They assassinated Lincoln, right? They got Lincoln in because Lincoln could inspire people to fight the slave owners. So they got Lincoln to kill the slave owners, and then they killed Lincoln. But so at one point they used the Masons, right? When you have a 2-hour show, we will talk about how the Rothschilds instigated the American Revolution. There's a brilliant book called Capitalism and Slavery, and the book doesn't talk about, does it? No, it doesn't talk about how the Rothschilds, and they never use the word Rothschild. They always talk about the City of London bankers. But it will give you all the pieces. It'll give you all the dots you need to see that that is what happened. Anyway, they use the Masons when they need to use the Masons. They use the Council on Foreign Relations when that is what works for them. They use the Bohemian Grove if that's what works for them. They use the Bilderberg.
Any large organization, the tentacles are in there.
That's
so that's
correct.
why people get fixated on the Illuminati bloodlines. Again, something that, okay, we know who the bankers are, but that's not something that's going to help you right now. Or, you know, that people fixate on the Masons or the Vatican or this group of people or that. You know what I don't like, and I'm not sure if this is going to rub you the wrong. I don't like, it's the Jews. When people say Jew, they don't understand. Jew is a religion. It's not a group of or ethnic group of people. It's a religion. Zionism is a religion. It's not a group of people. It's not a race.
Zionism is a political entity. It's not a religion. It's not supposed to be.
It's made to look like a religion. I mean, now every religion at this point has turned into a political thing. So
religious Jews are very, very offended by Zionism, which is politics parading as religion.
Yes.
Zionism is politics parading as religion. And the fact that the Rothschilds and these guys are Jewish, I couldn't be less interested in it. And I have, I have enormous warmth and affection for the hundreds of Jewish friends that I've had during my life. I mean, I love Jewish culture. You know, the Marx Brothers, right? Young Frankenstein. I love Jewish humor. And, you know, East LA, where I grew up, it was a Jewish community as well as a Latino community, as well as a German community, as well as a Catholic community. Anyway, but you run into lots of anti-Zionist people from Palestine and the Middle East saying, Jewish people saying, we got along with with Arab people, with Islamic people for centuries. But then you bring in these Zionists who want to kill everybody and who want to grab everything and who want to run everything and who want to dictate everything. And all of a sudden we have a war on our hands, and not very surprisingly, given what they did in Palestine. I'm sorry.
They're transplants from Europe. Yeah, Shawande Jews that came from Europe. They, you know, they're not even of those people. They're not from that region.
But religion has nothing to do with it. And in fact, the fact that they're Jewish, it has nothing important to do with it. They're Nazis. Right there,
exactly. There you go. You hit the nail on the head. So really quick. Here's we're gonna have to go in a second here. But here's another question: do these bankers, the Rothschild bankers or the London bankers, do they have a loyalty to a country or religion?
Oh, hell no.
Or
Israel, Israel. Right. I mean, Disraeli. When was Disraeli? Oh my goodness. I did. If you go to my YouTube channel, there's a video on Romeo and Juliet. So I did all this intensive, and I just finished one on Hamlet that I haven't posted there yet, but I will anyway. I did all of this intensive research into Shakespeare and King James and Queen Elizabeth, and I found this reference to how Elizabeth was struggling with the City of London bankers. They had her by the neck and they're dangling her. They're making demands on her that she's having trouble meeting. But this is 1600. So you guys know the history that the popes hated borrowing money at interest, so they forbade any of the Christian bankers from loaning money at interest, which put a real damper on Christian banking, and that void was filled by Jewish bankers. And so that's the history of it, and it's got nothing to do with anything. But I have great love and affection for Jewish people. I have enormous love and affection for the aspects of the Jewish religion that demand justice,
So,
right? For everybody. I love that.
Yeah, and you know what I mean.
But I hate Jewish bankers. I hate all bankers.
But I have Catholic friends. I have Protestant friends. And everybody. We all want the same. All our religions have basically the same rules.
No kidding.
And then you get to the point where if you're talking about Judeo-Christian religions, which include Muslim, all right, we're all talking about the God of David here, right? So but you said something. I want to ask you a question, and because I'm curious, I'm not challenging. This is a question.
Go ahead.
You said they're loyal to Israel. Why? What is so special about that region of the world that used to be Jerusalem that we now call Israel? That the actual Hebrew people who are Palestinian and the Orthodox Jews that from that tribe of Hebrew people, Semitic people, why is that area so important to these bankers?
I'm so glad you asked me that question. And we can only guess, right? I'm not them. I'm not in their head, but this is my guess, and it is not a sloppy guess. It's a very, very, very carefully crafted, factually based guess. But if you go to my Facebook page and you scroll down a couple of weeks, you'll find a post of an article from 1829. And in 1829, there's a journal of news from Asia in 1829 and probably 1828 and probably 1830. And, every week they would post just a bunch of random stuff, and they don't pretend, not a lot of analysis, but if you follow the stock market, we're going to give you a whole bunch of facts that you may be able to use to interpret what you should be doing in the stock market, for example. And that's who would subscribe to something like that, as investors trying to figure out what stock is liable to be hot based on the news that just came out. So just a bunch of random facts. And one of the random facts is that in 1829, the Rothschilds offered the Sultan of Turkey 350 billion piastres for Palestine. And then the Balfour Declaration, it took them 100 years, more or less, 90 years, to maneuver Britain into a position where Britain could hand them Palestine. They made, as far as I'm concerned, they made World War I happen. You can find statements from Zionists saying, we want this massive war to happen because when this massive war happens, Britain will be able to grab Palestine from the Ottomans and hand it to us, the Zionists representing the Rothschilds. But what the 1829 article tells you is what the Rothschilds wanted was a fief. They wanted to be the dictators of this area, that rule it as an aristocracy. And that's what they want in Israel. They want a land that they can rule as an aristocracy. Netanyahu answers to them absolutely, completely, strictly. He does what he is told. But they now, you see, through Israel, they have a Mossad. When they were in England, they had enormous power and influence in the British government, but they didn't have absolute control over British intelligence, and they didn't have absolute control over the British Parliament, and they didn't have absolute control over all sorts of things in Britain. But in Israel, they have absolute control over everything. They now have an army of their own, right? And they have nuclear weapons. They now have nuclear weapons, and they have a Mossad and all the other goodies that come along with having a state.
Yeah, a true base of operations, their own banking state almost is what you're kind of
Oh
like telling
man.
me. Wow.
Well, I guess Switzerland has been sort of their banking state, and rather still is, but Switzerland doesn't have a Mossad.
Right. So you're talking about a nation state. They have their own nation state.
They have
That's
their
what the
own.
goal was.
Yes, and they run Jeffrey Epstein. They have the Mossad to run Jeffrey Epstein, right?
You think
And
our
they have the
CIA?
Mossad.
You think the CIA and Mossad work hand in hand?
Excuse me. What, do I think the CIA gets to decide what to have for breakfast? I'm not sure.
I had to give you a softball, John.
Well, but see, hand in hand. No, they don't work hand in hand. That's not the relationship. They work puppeteer and puppet.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Right? They're the tail wagging the dog. If you ever wondered how it is that the tail wags the dog, the reason that Israel can wag the dog of the United States, freaking German Shepherd of the United States, right? The biggest, baddest dog on the planet, and Israel wags them like they were a bitch.
Yeah.
How's that happen? Well, because it's not Israel, it's the Rothschilds, and they have their tentacles and have since 1776. Right. Washington was their guy. Why did Washington push for a central bank that would be run by the London bankers? Because he was a tool of the Rothschilds. And Jefferson wasn't.
Right.
You know, whatever.
Neither was Mason. Hamilton was their
Oh,
guy.
absolutely. Oh, yeah.
So 2 more questions, and then we're going to end. We're at an hour and a half. This was absolutely, thank you, by the way. We're going to plug you too at the end here. So
I'm having a great time, and I always enjoy a good time. And,
yeah, absolutely.
And my compliments to you. Let me show you my bald spot and take my hat off.
Thanks. I hope you'll come back on the show, man, because you're just what is that? A fountainhead of information.
October 7th was an inside job. When I have that video ready, you're the first person I'm going to contact.
Excellent. Thank you. So for people who are viewing it, and I'm always one that, like, never pigeonhole yourself, but and that's not what I'm talking about here. But we talked about Israel, we talked about the Rothschilds, and the word Jewish kept coming up. I would like to point out, and I'm going to ask you this: people that don't know us, or don't know the history of this, they're like, oh, you're anti-Semitic, you're being anti-Israel, you're being anti-Jewish. That is not it. We have an understanding of who the real Jewish people are, the difference between Jewish religion, Zionism, and Semitic, and being Semitic to that area, and indigenous to that area.
The Palestinians are Semites. Freaking Netanyahu is Polish.
They're the people in the Bible that the Bible's talking about, evangelicals out there, just so you know.
But if you want to be anti-Semitic, slaughter Palestinians.
Yeah.
Netanyahu is not Semitic. He's Polish.
Jewish religion or Jewish people for all the problems of the world. That's what I kind of want to get out of here. That's not where we're at.
No, it's Jewish bankers.
Right.
I have nothing against Jewish people. I love Jewish culture, and like I said, I deeply honor and respect, and all praise and glory to those elements of Judaism that rally on the side of justice. And that's on my website. You can find, the quotes. I think I have it on my website. I meant to put it on my website, but somebody was saying, oh, they went, and maybe I might not have posted it, but somebody went and they found the section in the Bible of the people being the chosen people, and they pointed out that in the Bible, the chosen people are the chosen people because they seek justice. And I'm on the side of anybody who seeks justice. If you're on the side of justice, I'm on your side.
That's a great perspective, John. And the last question, and then we're going to plug in. We're going to get out of here because it's late for me. Are the central banks okay? So the SWIFT central banks, the SWIFT and the BRICS. Okay, the Anglo-Saxon bank, or the central banks from America, Europe, all that. The Rothschild banking consortium. And then you have the BRICS nations of banking consortium. Are they in cahoots? I ask every guest with good brains in their head about this.
And that's a really, really important question. And I think that if they were in cahoots, there would be no war on Ukraine. I think if they were in cahoots, there would have been no attack on China with COVID. COVID was a biological weapon that they launched against China and against all the retirees. They wanted to kill all the retirees in the United States and in Western Europe, and it didn't work. But anyway, so they're not very competent people. The Kennedy assassination was a friggin' disaster, right? Anybody with any brains knew it was an inside job the day that it happened. Anyhow, Saudi Arabia would have no reason to leave the Western banking system and join the BRICS banking system if they were the same. They're not the same. I don't believe they're the same. I have to admit that I don't trust myself because I want so much for them to not be the same. But I just outlined for you why I think that it's very clear that they are not the same.
Very strong evidence to your point.
And the thing is, if you're not a monster, I don't think it's necessary. If just because you're a banker, I don't think that means you have to be a monster. But these guys are monsters, and they have been since the 1600s. The Rothschilds, they're just one family, but the Rothschilds have been war profiteers of the highest degree, completely and utterly and explicitly, and as far as I can tell, solely in the 1650 and 1776, they were war profiteers. It's what they did. That was it for them. And they made, oh my God, they made the King of England. But America declares independence. Why does Britain have to go to war just because America declared independence? Because the bankers made them, because they were going to be able to make fabulous profits off of both ends.
Yeah.
They drove the United States into their debt by loaning them money to fight the British, and they drove the British monstrously into debt by loaning them the money to fight the Americans.
They have a trail of mega death to create their hegemony, and now the hegemony is the U.S. petrodollar, and I believe that now that that's being challenged, we are going to see they have no problem wasting millions of lives to make sure that they stay on top. And
they have, but I don't think they can do it. Right? They wanted to destroy Russia through Ukraine, and boy, did that ever now.
400,000 Ukrainians were sacrificed to that end. So
how many?
400,000, dude.
Oh, at least at a minimum. And I would have imagined that the number of dead was greater than that, and the number of injured is probably 10 times that. And good gravy. People who went to Iraq and came back skeletons. You know what I mean? They're just really, 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 really monstrously emotionally destroyed from the experience. And that happened in World War I, and you heard about it. And it happened in World War II, and you heard about it. And it happened in Vietnam, and you heard about it.
Yeah, I've seen
and
Vietnam,
it's happening in Ukraine.
It's a horrible thing when they talk about it.
Yeah,
horrible.
And it's happening. Oh, Ukraine is. And this guy Jeffrey Sachs, I mentioned it before, right? A Columbia professor and UN official, and worked for the Lancet, and big time guy. And he says he looks at this and he sees Europe was chugging along happily, doing well, on its way to recovery from COVID, and then this Ukraine crap had to start up, and it's just ruined Europe. Who benefits from this? And Jeffrey Sachs says the military-industrial complex. And he's not a radical guy. He doesn't want to be spouting radical stuff. And he anyway. And that's the bankers. The military-industrial complex is the bankers. And
absolutely.
I don't care that they're Jewish. It's beside the point, and I'll apologize to anybody who wants me to apologize for mentioning the really, really irrelevant fact that they are Jewish. It couldn't be.
No, I just wanted to get clarification, because we all get when you go against the bankers, that's the first thing that they go after. Oh,
well, of course.
You don't like Jewish.
What else can they say? Right?
That's
what else? Well, we need to wind this up, right?
Yeah, let's tell the good people, number one, where they can find you.
Oh my goodness.
And how to get your video, your DVD breakthrough, and let's do that.
Okay, well, are they looking at Breakthrough JFK Murder Solved on the screen?
Yes, they are. Can you see it?
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, they're seeing that too. Yeah, it's up on
Okay,
the
so
site.
$13.99 you can get it, but you could, if you can find my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is, I forget. Do you
It's
have
John
that?
Hankey, and it's at Real History Channel 1. So,
Okay.
ladies and gentlemen, I had problems trying to find it with that name. I went to YouTube search and I punched in John Hankey, and it came right up.
Oh, that's interesting because I can find it because that's how the shadow banning works, is that they want me to not know that I'm shadow banned. So if I look for it, it'll come up. They have reached that level of sophistication. It used to be that I couldn't find my own stuff. Anyway, good luck finding that. You might have luck finding it on Vimeo. You can watch a 4-minute trailer, really, really good, solid stuff for free on Vimeo. You type in Breakthrough JFK, and I think it's the first and only thing that comes up. And you can rent it for like $3 and you can buy it for like $9. And I recommend you want to own this because they're gonna suppress it, and eventually, if they don't kill me, I'll just get old enough to die on my own. And you, man, when I'm dead, you are not going to be able to find this. I expect the next day they'll jump in and trash it every place that it exists. Anyway, darkroom.film, you might be able to find it. That's a friend of mine, and I'm anxious to promote it. So I guess, yeah, that's it, right?
Yeah,
Amazon.
ladies and gentlemen, go to Amazon and buy this, so you own it and you'll have it, and you can, support this guy. This guy right here. You might not agree with everything he says. I might not agree with everything he says, but we agree on about 90% of the things. And what we need to do, ladies and gentlemen, is find people, talk to them, even if we disagree with them or think we might disagree with them. Find the common ground so we can fight our common enemy.
Let me give my email. Yeah.
Yeah, give out your email. You want to? That's another thing. He's willing to talk to any of you. So
that's right. xjhanky@gmail. And that's what you're saying. You don't learn from people that think exactly like you. I'm very anxious to learn where I've made mistakes. I'm very anxious. I know that I do it all the time, right? Anyway.
So that was xjhanky@gmail, right?
xjhanky@gmail.
Okay, and ladies and gentlemen, if you have a problem trying to get a hold of him, you can email me, and he's given me permission. I'll get him in, I'll pass the email along to you. Anything else to say to the audience, John, before we cut out here?
2 times. Peace out.
Nice. And now, ladies and gentlemen, remember, time is your most valuable. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was the interview with Mr. John Hankey. I hope you enjoyed it. I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight, and everybody have a great day tomorrow. And remember, time is your most valuable commodity. Try not to waste it. Spend it doing something you love, with someone you love, improving yourself, or preferably all 3 of these things. Ladies and gentlemen, until we meet again.
Your time is your most valuable commodity. Cherish it and use it wisely. Until we meet again.